Welcome to the Gay Buddhist Forum, where teachers from all schools of Buddhism offer their perspectives on the Dharma and its application in modern times, especially for LGBTQI audiences. These talks are offered freely to the world and made possible by appreciative listeners. If you would like to support our efforts to share the Dharma with underserved audiences, please visit gaybuddhist.org. There you can donate, find a list of upcoming speakers, or enjoy many hundreds of these recorded talks dating back to 1996.
Speaker today, but before I introduce him, why don't we just go around and say our names. My name is Larry.
Robin.
Let's go around the inner circle and then the outer. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Joe.
Jim. Alan. Mike. Yeah.
Word.
Clint.
Rob.
Douglas.
John.
Branson. Dave. Andrew.
Bill.
Chris.
Chris. Howard.
Dexter. Chad. Richard. Alan.
Frank.
Snake.
David.
Mark. Clarence.
JP.
Tom. Todd. Martin.
Did we get every people back there?
Back there.
Arnold. John.
Don. Larry. Peter.
Okay, thank you very much. Our speaker today is a GBF member, David Richo, who lives in Santa Barbara but has been here in San Francisco for the summer, and it's been a very nice opportunity for all of us to get to know him and for him to become part of our Sangha, and it's going to be sad to see him go, but he'll be back. Today he's going to talk about something that he wrote a book about. And the book is called Unexpected Miracles, The Gift of Synchronicity and How to Open It, it's going to be at different light, by the way, if anybody's interested. David is a psychotherapist and a writer, and he has also written a book called When Love Meets Fear, How to Become Defenseless and Resourceful. He obviously has thought a lot about things that affect everybody's lives. So, without any more, I will turn it over to David.
Can everyone hear when I'm just speaking at this level? Okay. Well, thank you. And I'd like to thank everybody here for this great opportunity to be part of this Sangha. I think you guys should really congratulate yourselves on having created such a wonderful space and experience of the Dharma. So I've not only found friends here, which I feel very gratified about, but I've learned a lot, and I hope I've made some small contribution, but I've received a great contribution. And I really respect you and how you've pulled this together. It's an unusual moment for Buddhism for this to happen. So I'd also like to acknowledge that at this moment there are many bodhisattvas who are with us, and it's important for us to acknowledge their presence. They love to be where people are looking for the Dharma. And I found a wonderful affirmation in a book on Tibetan Buddhism that I was reading recently. And I would just like to begin with this statement because it's so wonderful. In the space before us is the living Buddha, surrounded by all the bodhisattvas, like the full moon surrounded by the stars. So if we could begin, if you would like to say these words after me. In the space before me is the living Buddha, surrounded by all the bodhisattvas, like the full moon surrounded by stars. Okay. Well, that phrase, in the space before me, that's the Buddha mind. It's a world that's a little bit different, or very much different, from the linear world of the ego. It's a larger spiritual space where cause and effect gives way to something much deeper. Perhaps what Wordsworth meant by a sudden flash of the mystery of an invisible world. Well, synchronicity, which is meaningful coincidence, comes from that place. It comes from the larger self or Buddha mind, not from the ego. It's a meaningful chance. And, of course, the ego can't handle a phrase like meaningful chance. They don't seem to go together. You'd have to be in the world of the self, in the pure space that opens before you. And by meaningful, I mean any moment in which the Buddha mind manifests, as in mindfulness, for instance, or when you find a way to love more, or when you find a way to have more wisdom, or when you find a way to fulfill your deepest needs and wishes. Fulfillment leads to happiness. And the purpose of Buddhism is happiness. So it is about that fulfillment. And when something is left unfulfilled and unopened, then karma results instead of happiness. So that's the subject that we're looking at today. It's a big one, and we don't have a lot of time, so I'll just say some immediate things and some hopefully useful things, and then we'll open it up for questions. So synchronicity is meaningful coincidence as opposed to a mere coincidence in which two similar things happen, but they're not particularly meaningful. For instance, I was talking to a friend of mine who teaches art, and I said, when I get back to Santa Barbara, I would like to paint the rooms in my house. All of them are white, and I'd like to paint them in different colors. Do you have any suggestions about which colors go with which rooms? So she said no, and then a day later she called me and she said, there's an article in the Examiner today on how to choose the colors for your rooms. So why don't you look at it? Well, that's an example of a coincidence. It's not particularly meaningful in terms of the larger destiny of my life, but it is a coincidence. So we could say that synchronicity has many forms, but two of the central forms are these. A meaningful coincidence that I just mentioned. So two unplanned events happen, and strikingly and almost with an eerie feeling, give you a sense that something's going on that's bigger than yourself. Like, oh, what a strange coincidence. And that's part of the sense of meaningfulness in it, that reaction, that you're in something that's larger than your ego. Secondly, it's a meaningful opportunity, such as a relationship or an event or a crisis that leads you to find yourself or open yourself in a whole new way. So you meet someone, and in a chance way, and you establish a relationship, and it becomes very stormy, and it also has a lot of joy in it. And in the course of it, you find out many things about your capacity to love. And you find out many things about what you're really about sexually. And you realize that, oh, this relationship, even though it may not work out or hasn't worked out, has taught me so much. And so it has had a meaningful place in the overall texture of my life. That meaningful opportunity is synchronicity. For instance, it could also happen in being fired from a job. And you find out, I'm better off not working for people. And look at all the creative things I've gotten into now that I'm not working at a particular agency or place. So it seems as if there are chance meetings and chance experiences that show us something about ourselves that we wouldn't have found out otherwise. That's what we're looking at here. And sometimes synchronicity is negative or painful. Sometimes the results and realizations are painful. But the central point is that something is being revealed about our path and about the world that's larger than our ego. Now here's one more quick example that might be helpful. The other day I got together with Dexter and we took a walk together. He met me over at my house. While I was putting on my jacket, I noticed that I could hear that he was playing the piano. And I thought, oh, he has skills with that. Then we walked down 18th. We were going toward Castro. We were going on our way to Pascua. And we walked by an antique shop, and I saw a plaster statue that I recognized as Saint Cecilia, because she's pictured holding a musical instrument, and she's the patron of music. So I said, that's Saint Cecilia. And he said, oh, I've just been in a church called Saint Cecilia's Church. Well, now we just have a mere coincidence, okay? It hasn't become very meaningful because our lives aren't really being affected by it. But let's say when we got to Pascua, we were sitting there at the table, and he actually did talk about his path and about how he would like to have a teacher and so forth and what teachers he's met. Let's say at the table next to us there was a woman sitting. This would be unusual for that particular Pascuas. And she said, oh, I happened to overhear your conversation, and, I'm from California, but I've just come back from Dharamsala. I've been working with the Dalai Lama. I'm here as a teacher, and what I'm trying to do is to show the relationship of music to the Dharma. And so would you like to come to my presentation, which will be happening next week? He or I or both say, yes, we'd be very interested. She gives us her card, and we say thank you. We leave. When we get outside in the light, we look at the card, and it says Cecilia Rodriguez. So now so many things have happened. A whole series of things have combined here. It would make us more apt to pay attention to what she is going to teach. Because the experience of synchronicity kind of betokens something afoot in your life that is trying to happen. And the idea is to join with it, to cooperate with it. And with it is this realization that something, we know not what, is actually at work, we know not how, helping us on our path. You see how it puts us in contact with a larger life than that contained in our bodies. We can't make it happen, nor do we need to, but it does require a certain amount of spiritual faith to call it meaningful coincidence as opposed to, oh, that's just an ordinary coincidence, that's just random happening, that could happen to anybody. And that doesn't fit with Jung's statement. He's the one who talked about synchronicity in recent times. He says, there is no room for chance in the meaningful world of the psyche. Because everything is conspiring to help us wake up. Even events and individuals that seem to have no connection, who don't seem to be teachers, they're all in on it. In on what? Helping us wake up. You know, the Buddha was asked once, who the hell are you? Are you a god? Are you a saint? Are you an ordinary person? Are you a prophet? He said, I am awake. That's it. I am awake. He didn't give any name or he didn't give any title. He just described himself with that adjective, I am awake. Awake in two senses. I am present and aware in the here and now, not engaged in the sports of ego, fear, desire, attachment, judgment, control. I've let go of all that. And he even has a technology for doing that. That's the mindfulness meditation. And secondly, he's awake in the sense that everything about him, all his potentials have been activated. He had a potential as a teacher. He activated that. He had a potential as a prince. He activated that. He has a potential as a friend, such as to Ananda. He activated that. In other words, everything is awakened inside. All the inner gifts and the potentials are engaged, and we all have that same, not exactly the same set of gifts, but we all have a set of unique gifts that want to awaken. Synchronicity comes along to help us see where they are and show us how to turn them on. Talents, awarenesses, a capacity for joy. We each have a very unique capacity for loving. No two people in here love in exactly the same way. To be held by one person in here would feel differently than to be held by someone else. So what if part of the work of combining the Dharma with our psychological health, which is my main interest and work in life, what if that was about opening up that capacity to love, and then all the people who came along in the course of our lifetime came along just for that, just to help us open that up. What if that's what's going on? Can you imagine the joy that you would feel? Can you imagine the trust that you would feel? Because in that world, nothing could go wrong. Because everything is aimed at that one target. What is that target? To wake up that sleeping beauty of love that's inside. To wake up the wisdom, to wake up the compassion, so forth. So we all have the chance to release them, all these qualities, and opportunities come along and coincidences come along that help us do that. That's what synchronicity is about. Lest those words of the Talmud be said of us. How sad for those who do not sing. They die with their songs still inside them. So, once we see that there are these assisting forces in the universe that seem to want us to wake up, we realize that synchronicity is a gift, and the Latin word for gift is grace. And that seems to be a Christian concept, but it isn't. It's an archetypal reality, and it's just as much in Buddhism as in Christianity. Because in Buddhism, individual practice is not enough for awakening to happen. For instance, in the Obaku tradition, which is a Zen tradition, Japanese Zen tradition, and in the Pure Land tradition, we are upheld by a loving force of compassion directly from the heart of Amitabha Buddha, that's the Buddha of light and life, who's continually beaming out to us the graces that are required for the awakening. If it could be done just by the technology of sitting in mindfulness, it would be from the force of ego. It would be something that we put effort out and made happen. But it's a combination. You put out the effort, and then something else comes along that finally pulls it together. Very simple example in the story of Pinocchio. It seems as if to become a real boy, to wake up from the wooden state of ego and to become real, one has to do certain things. Go to school, go inside the whale and save your father, save the goldfish, save the cat. It seems as if that's what you have to do. He does all that, but where does he wind up? Waterlogged on the beach. That wasn't enough. It's the blue fairy who has to come along and say, oh, I saw all the effort that you put out, and now I bring you the final thing that makes you real, and that's this wand. That's the grace. That's the archetype. That's the cartoon-like articulation of a deep truth about us, that what we do will never be enough. There's something else that comes from a spiritual source. You don't have to call it God, but it's some type of grace, some type of free gift that's always coming our way. And synchronicity is one of the ways that it comes. It's right there at the meeting of effort and grace, and it makes the whole practice much richer, because you realize that, oh, I'm not sitting here alone. I am accompanied by all these bodhisattvas who are using their wand to mix up the pot of my life so that the ingredients will come together in a really enlightened way. This little poem, written as a commentary on the Zen ox herding pictures, I always repeat to myself, it's just so profound. This is the part of the story in which he has tamed the ox, and now he is realizing that he has to come back to his own meditation. Sitting alone in his empty hut, he takes no mind for earthly goods, while red roses at his door bloom continually red. So he's sitting there and he's meditating, and while he's meditating, the roses are coming to the full fruition, blooming, coming to their full potential. And all he has to do is sit. But while he's sitting, something else is at work that's blooming and supporting his effort and showing him the wonderful fragrance that it has. So all of that comes together, and you realize how many spiritual gifts there are out there. Something always at work, we know not how, is wanting us to wake up. So, I want to open up for questions, and I've just given like a very brief overview of the subject, but I want to address the more specific things that you're interested in. But just before we do that, let's just do a 1-minute exercise in which you simply, if you could close your eyes for a minute, and simply recall the series of chance events or opportunities that brought you into this room, how you got to this Sangha. What brought you to GBF? Because this is an important event in your life. And what lined up? How did things line up in such a way that you wound up here today instead of still in bed? So just kind of notice that. And as you notice, just give some thanks to whoever the people were that brought you here. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes and return to this time and place. Okay, so questions that arose while I was talking? Steve?
What you're talking about reminds me of one of the main themes of the first book on the Celestine prophecy, when they talk about looking for serendipitous events that maybe are just a little more than chance. When that book came out, it suggested just then practicing through daily life, staying open and looking for these events. I found that I began to project a little bit more into a lot of seemingly synchronous events than was actually there in hindsight. What's a good rule to discern between what we might over-project into something and what may actually be there? It's hard. That's a fine line.
Well, what helps me to see if it's synchronicity is a series of events, not just one. For instance, a dream that also relates to whatever the external world events were. Also, it helps me to share with somebody else, to talk about it with a friend. Hey, these are the things that happen. What do you think? Rather than just to keep it inside my own head. Usually you don't know it's synchronicity until later. You look back and you see how it all happened that way. But you aren't usually so aware of the meaningfulness while the events are going on. It's only later that you look back and say, oh, that's how it all fit together. And when you realize that it happens like that things fit together from outside you, that's the sense of accompaniment, to use a musical phrase. That you're accompanied by somebody or something, or many things, or many people. And it's what in the hero's journey is called assisting forces. And of course we also have afflicting forces who get in the way of things. But that's what helps me, is to see more of a series.
That makes sense.
Okay. Yes. Your name is?
David.
All right.
Actually, what it reminded me of was actually two little things. I have a particularly close relationship with my middle nephew. I have a close relationship with all three of my nephews and my twin sister's children. But this relationship is extraordinarily close and a little mysterious. And one of the great gifts I got in my life was to watch my father, who did not have a particularly close relationship with me, be so incredibly loving towards his grandsons, which was very wonderful. And it was a great gift for me to witness. And in my family, before I was born, right before I was born, within a year, there had been a tragedy, and my parents would have first child, and that child die at his birthday party, trauma. And I never quite understood in my life the consequence of that relationship to me until after my parents died, and I saw pictures of my father taking care of that little boy. They had always denied there were any pictures taken, but of course there were all these pictures taken. It just was too painful. And I saw them, and I cried for about 8 hours as I watched them, because I saw that connection between my father and his firstborn son. And then I got to see that reemerging many years later, 30 years later, with his grandson, my nephew. So I went up to my nephew one day and I said, I don't quite understand why and how we're so close. I don't really quite understand. And he said, you're my connection to Grandpa, don't you get it? And then I thought, whoa. That what has happened here is that somehow I got a lot of that love and openness and connectedness from my father through my nephew, which of course he had gotten directly from his grandpa, and which I had witnessed, and now I was getting. It was like a little bit shattering, because of course I had created my life around that separation between me and my father. Suddenly to have that totally dissolve and just not be was a moment. It was a moment. And it was a presence. And I thought, whoa, this is really a gift. You know, that piece of grace. And the second piece that I thought of when you talked was, I just came back from the wedding of my youngest nephew, and I had taken my partner with me, and it was really the first time he'd ever come back with me. And I had been hesitant to do that for a while because of my relationship with my twin sister, which is very powerful and a little bit conflicted. And when we were there, I got to watch Mike, that's his name, be so loving towards my twin sister that it instantly altered one piece of my relationship with her, which was, we're very close. We talk 3 or 4 times a week. But there's a little bit of a physical barrier between the two of us. And watching him be so loving towards her, I found myself hugging her like all the time. I mean, and whatever resistance was in her, you know, to be open to that, had dissolved. It was like a moment that my connection to him, and more particularly his connection to her, had melted away some barrier there. It was grace. It was lovely.
Well, thank you for telling us that. It's very touching and powerful.
And I think for me, the peace around all this is unexpected. That for me, synchronicity always brings with it something completely unexpected, almost unimagined, unimaginable.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Yes.
You talked this morning, for me right now, is in a moment of synchronicity. And I won't go into it, but for me anyways, when these moments occur, I get all choked up. And is that a characteristic of such moments? What's that about?
I think what's happening is you're in the presence of something that's greater than yourself and yet in you. And it's just literally choking, or, you know, you're just so sensitive to it. Well, you must be a person that has that sensitivity. So you react like that. Thank you for telling us.
I want to come today. I'm a little hungover, not too much, just a little hungover from a late night and a fun night. And more scotch than I really should have. And feeling kind of angry and upset and back of my mind very concerned about three-week intensive period on the presents that I'm going to do next week. And I just think it was an amazing, and I came late, I didn't come to the meditation also. And I didn't know who was speaking. I even didn't know if there would be, so maybe Larry would. It was just an amazing experience to hear you talk about something that I know is very true to me. Fighting, and my main practice. One of the main things that I keep thinking about is trying to get rid of blocks that interfere between me and seeing the way, which just keeps intruding on me usually. Like that, one way or another. So thank you. It's very good. And I think that's an act of synchronicity that I didn't expect.
Well, thank you.
Enjoy the talk. Respond to and to get to know you also.
Well, thank you. It's, I think, a good phrase for this, for what both of you have brought up, is that kind of combines the subject of synchronicity and grace and the unexpected. We are not enough, and we are not alone. See, when you acknowledge my ego is not enough, I have to let go of that ego and let something else emerge. So I'm not enough, but I'm also not alone because I'm continually supported by all these other forces.
Thank you very much, first of all. This, too, for me, is one of those incidents. I mean, I found listening to your beginning a little frightening initially, and then just let go. I mean, I broke up with my boyfriend and got fired from my job within 2 days of each other, and sort of spun around in circles for 3 days thinking this is the worst disaster known to mankind. My ego's response is, how could the world do this to me? And within a day found a book on Tibetan Buddhism that had been in my closet since I was in undergraduate school that I hadn't bothered to read, that basically walked me through the process of what's happening with me. Got 3 job offers within 5 days without having really made much effort, and have gotten turned on to probably about 5 to 8 powerful lifestyle, self-search, honest, look at the real Larry alternatives, and have gotten real clear on the bullshit artist, excuse me, Lord Buddha, in your temple, of what I'm capable of being, and see how I may have contributed to all of those dynamics. And I think that, very bluntly, thered be no vested interest in my doing that kind of introspection had I kept the boyfriend and kept the job. So it's humbling. I mean, it's really very, on one level it's very frightening, and on another level it's very humbling. And I particularly like the feel of that word grace, because it's real clear to me now, finally, that something else much more powerful and much wiser than me is at work. I mean, I could have stayed on the job. The money was fantastic. I could have postured in a certain way to make it work. I could have kept the boyfriend. But obviously, both of them serve the purpose to move me where I'm going. I have no idea where I'm going. I mean, and for the first time, I'm able to say, well, okay, at some point we'll land somewhere. I don't know where, but, somewhere. So I don't mean to be terribly long-winded, but I'm in my own way trying to say, yes, I buy a hook, line, and sinker because I'm living it right now. It's a little scary, but there's something in me that says, just chill out, dude. It'll work. Let it go. Let it take care of itself. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Larry. God, you guys are bringing up such wonderful examples of this. Snake.
I believe in synchronicity. I kind of think that one of the ways you can force synchronicity that's very helpful is when you have a question, that you just can't figure out the answer. And that is simply go use a divination tool like the I Ching. You know, I have utter faith in the I Ching, and you know, every time I throw it, it's exactly what I, what I needed. You know, and I don't always realize it then, but if I just keep it in mind that that's what the I Ching says, it'll prove itself.
And it's interesting you're bringing that up, because Jung wrote the introduction to Wilhelm's translation of the I Ching, and while he was studying the I Ching and astrology, that's when he came up with the idea of synchronicity. Because the divination, you throw the way you throw the coins exactly fits the message that you need in your life at that moment. And in astrology, the layout of the stars somehow is relevant to what your own milestones are. So he started to see what Shakespeare had seen so many years before, that the harmonies in the world directly reflect the harmonies in ourselves.
I find it so powerful sometimes. It's like one feels like you're the center of the universe, and then you realize the center is everywhere. For every person, they're the center.
Yeah, and the circumference nowhere. It's that expanding. Yes, your name is
Rob. Could you comment on the consequences of not picking up on these things? Am I right in assuming they tend to just knock a little louder until you can't ignore it?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Two possible things can happen. One is like a dream deferred. It just kind of fizzles out. The universe knocks, as Shakespeare says in Romeo and Juliet, who knocks so loudly? That something is knocking more and more loudly so that we can hear it. But if we keep rejecting it, we have the freedom to say no and to lose out for the time being. That's one option. And the other is that you could have it happen in such a resounding way, as in the example Larry gave, that the losses that occurred were so obvious that you just couldn't deny it. You get that kind of further message. A simple example of this is in The Wizard of Oz, because at the beginning of the story, it's clear that she needs to make some kind of a journey. Based on her own ego, she makes that journey. She takes the dog, she leaves home, while the movie's in black and white. She only gets as far as meeting the wizard, who easily convinces her to go back home. So she doesn't take the message, I have to go on a journey. Instead, she goes back. When she gets back home, of course, the tornado is just beginning. Her family is already down under the ground there, so there's no room for her, or nobody's was able to find her. Suddenly, she's picked up and thrown into the next world. She's thrown into the next chapter of her life without her being in control of it. So, okay, you couldn't do it, so we'll just make it happen. So sometimes it's like that. I mean, the story is an archetype of that experience. Same thing happened to Jonah. Don't want to preach? Okay, you'll be swallowed by the whale and you'll have to do it. So some people experience it that way, as kind of a force that's larger than themselves. No matter what you say, it's going to happen. And then at other times, you kind of get away with it and you just kind of miss it, as Francis Thompson says, tis your estranged faces that miss the many splendored thing. So we can miss it. And that's why it's so important to be awake.
If that happens, is there a way to rekindle that passion once you realize it's gone?
Yeah, usually something else comes along and a whole new wave begins that might even be larger than the one before. So I have that trust that it'll come around again when the time is right. Okay, our time is about up. If you have any other questions, I'll be around afterwards, and I'll also be at the lunch. But I do want to end with a poem, since we talked about love and how that's our ultimate destiny. And also this picks up on what you just brought up, because this is a poem about how somebody was offered love and said no to it. It's by George Hubbard, who was an Anglican minister of the 17th century. All his poetry is religious. It's written in the style of the metaphysical poets, so you'll notice some little sexual innuendos that are thrown in to brighten up the picture. But I find it very powerful, and I would like to share it. Love bade me welcome, but my soul drew back, guilty of dust and sin. But quick-eyed love, observing me grow slack from my first entrance in, drew nearer to me, sweetly questioning if I lacked anything. A guest, I answered, worthy to be here. You shall be he, said love. I, the unkind, the ungrateful, ah, my dear, I cannot look on thee. Love took my hand, and smiling did reply, who made the eyes but I? True, Lord, but I have marred them. Let my shame go where it doth deserve. Ah, you must sit down, said love, and taste my meat. So I did sit and eat.
Thank you for listening to the Gay Buddhist Forum. If you would like to hear several new talks per month and be notified of upcoming speakers so you can participate live, please subscribe to this podcast, like us on Facebook, and join our mailing list by visiting gaybuddhist.org.